Stop for a moment and take a real, honest look at your life. Think about the decisions you've made, the paths you've chosen, the people you've kept close, and even the dreams you've pursued. Do all of these truly come from you? Or is there, hidden somewhere deep within your mind, something else making these choices for you? We often imagine that our lives are steered entirely by conscious thought, that we are rational beings, carefully weighing pros and cons before deciding. But what if that's only part of the truth? What if, in reality, most of our decisions are shaped by something far older, far quieter, and far more powerful than conscious reasoning? Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the last century, believed that much of what we call the self is in fact a facade, a kind of mask. Beneath it, our thoughts, emotions, and actions are quietly directed by unconscious forces. Think of them as hidden programs running in the background of your mind. You don't notice them, you don't choose them, and yet they shape almost everything about your life. And here is where the unsettling part begins. These hidden programs were not designed to set you free. They were shaped to keep you safe. But safe in this case doesn't mean fulfilled, liberated, or fully alive. Safe means confined. Safe means repeating familiar patterns. Safe means staying exactly where you are, even when a part of you is desperate to grow. Imagine for a moment that inside you live small psychological entities, subpersonalities that observe the world, decide how you should act, and, when you least expect it, take control. Jung called them autonomous complexes. They don't ask for your permission. They don't consult your goals, your values, or your plans. They simply act. And here's the trap. When they sense that you are trying to change, they resist even harder, working to keep you locked in the same old patterns. Think of those moments when you said, "I don't know why I did that," or "That wasn't me." Those weren't just slip-ups. They were signals that something hidden was in control. And when these forces combine, when they reinforce one another, Jung warned that we enter a state he called psychological possession, living under the illusion of control, when in fact we are passengers being carried by ancient fears. Jung identified 3 of these fears as especially powerful. They are subtle, invisible, and yet they quietly dictate the shape of our lives. To understand them is to find the keys to a prison you didn't even know you were living in. So I'll ask again. Are you ready to face the 3 dark fears that have been guiding your life from the shadows? To understand the fears that Jung spoke of, we first need to enter a darker chapter of the human psyche. It begins with something he called autonomous complexes. Now, that phrase may sound technical, but what it describes is something you've already felt in your own skin, probably even yesterday. A complex is like a small personality living inside you. Not a metaphorical one, not just a poetic way of speaking, but an actual psychological system made of memories, emotions, images, and impulses. Each complex is built around a core of emotional energy. And when that core is touched, when a memory, a word, or a situation activates it, it doesn't just influence you. It takes control. Think of them as islands floating in the ocean of your mind. Your conscious personality, the version of you that you like to believe is always in charge, sails calmly across the surface. But at any moment, you can drift into the gravity of one of these islands. And in that instant, the calm, balanced you disappears, and another self emerges. A self that reacts, defends, attacks, or collapses in fear. That you've experienced this before. Maybe someone made a small, innocent comment, but suddenly you felt wounded, ready to withdraw or lash out. Maybe an opportunity appeared, but it reminded you of a past failure, and before you knew it, you stepped back, saying, "Not now. I'm not ready." In those moments, it wasn't your conscious will making the decision. It was a complex, and here's what makes them so unnerving. You don't notice when it happens. From the inside, it feels like you. Yet afterward, you look back and say, "I don't know what came over me." That's because the complex borrowed your voice, your body, your identity, and acted as if it were you. Jung described this as psychological possession. It's not supernatural. It's not demons. It's your own psyche hijacked by contents that are not under your control. The worst part is how easy it is for others to press these hidden buttons. A casual remark, a critical glance, even a tone of voice, and suddenly your whole behavior shifts. Without realizing it, you've handed over the steering wheel. But Jung insisted that complexes are not necessarily enemies. They are pieces of your history, fragments of old wounds and unresolved experiences that got frozen in time. They keep reacting as if the past were still happening. And until you bring them into among all the fears Jung uncovered, this first one may be the most deceptive because it doesn't show up as fear at all. It disguises itself as caution, as common sense, as the little voice that says, "Not now, maybe later. Be reasonable. Don't take unnecessary risks." But beneath that disguise lies what Jung called the fear of individuation, the unconscious resistance to becoming who you really are. Individuation was Jung's word for the process of discovering your true self. It means peeling back the layers of conditioning, masks, and expectations until you begin to live from your core essence, not the version of you that parents, teachers, or society molded, but the self that existed before those influences took hold. For Jung, individuation was not just psychological growth, it was the very purpose of life. But here's the paradox. The path to individuation is terrifying. From the very beginning of our lives, we're trained to conform. As children, we're taught to be polite, to behave, to fit in. Don't draw too much attention. Don't speak too loudly. Don't reveal too much of yourself. Little by little, we learn that survival means being acceptable, predictable, and safe. And so we construct an identity that pleases the world, even if it suffocates the soul. Now imagine what happens when you start moving toward your authentic path. Maybe you decide to change careers because your job feels like a cage. Maybe you walk away from a toxic relationship. Maybe you finally say no in a place where you've always said yes. On the surface, these may seem like acts of empowerment, but inside, something begins to stir. A subtle panic rises. It feels like a psychic alarm screaming, "Go back. This is dangerous. Stay where it's safe." But safe for whom? Safe for the conditioned self that was built to conform. Safe for the system that benefits from your compliance. Not safe for the deeper you, the one desperate to be free. And here lies the trap. Most people would rather stay in the familiar comfort of conformity than face the existential loneliness of being truly unique. To individuate is to give up excuses. It's to stop blaming luck, fate, or circumstance, and to stand fully responsible for your own life. That level of freedom, that level of accountability, is unbearable for many. Think about it. To survive in the world, each of us learns, from a very early age, to wear masks. Jung called this mask the persona, and it's important to understand. It isn't simply a lie or a trick. The persona is a social tool, a role we play to navigate the expectations of others. There is the self you show at work, the self you show to friends, the self you show to family. Each one is shaped to fit into the demands of those environments. In many ways, the persona protects us. It smooths out the rough edges of our personality. It shields us from direct criticism, and it allows us to function in groups without constant conflict. Without it, life in society would be almost unbearable. The persona, in that sense, is useful, but here is where the danger begins. Over time, the mask starts to fuse with the face. You begin to forget where the performance ends and your true self begins. At first, you are the persona, but eventually, the persona begins to wear you. Think about it. How many times have you chosen words not because they reflected your true feelings, but because you knew they would avoid conflict? How often have you nodded along, pretended to agree, or stayed silent to maintain an image? At what point does that performance stop being a choice and start being who you think you are? This is the trap of the persona. The longer you cling to it, the more it becomes a prison. Jung compared it to living inside a luxurious cell. From the outside, it looks polished, respectable, even enviable. But the bars are real. And the longer you stay there, the harder it becomes to remember what lies beyond. Deep down, of course, you know. You feel it in the moments when your shadow, the parts of yourself you've hidden, tries to break through. Maybe it shows up as anger you can't explain, as sadness you push aside, or as impulses you immediately suppress. Your true self is trying to breathe, but the mask is too tight. And so you press it down again, because the risk of showing yourself feels unbearable. The persona is fueled by fear, the fear of rejection, of criticism, of isolation. To drop the mask means to expose yourself, to let others see your contradictions, your flaws, your full humanity. And for those who have relied on external approval their whole lives, that kind of exposure feels like death. But Jung warned, the more we identify with the persona, the further we drift from the self. We begin to live not as who we are, but as who we think others expect us to be. The mask becomes permanent, and the soul. So far, we've seen how the resistance to individuation holds you back from becoming who you truly are, and how the persona keeps you locked inside a mask. But Jung warned of something even more disturbing. What happens when these forces combine? He called it psychological possession. Now, when you hear the word possession, you might imagine something supernatural. But Jung meant something far more intimate and far more unsettling. Psychological possession is what happens when your conscious mind is overtaken by unconscious forces, complexes, masks, fears that act as if they were you. In those moments, you're not living. You're being lived. Here's how it works. Imagine a complex inside you, an old wound, an unresolved fear gets triggered. Maybe it's criticism from a colleague or a reminder of a past failure. Instantly, that complex takes control. You lash out, or shut down, or withdraw. Before you even realize what happened, the persona rushes in to cover it up, adjusting your tone, your posture, your words so everything appears normal to the outside world. And then, just as you begin to sense something is off, the resistance to individuation whispers, "Don't try to change this. It's too risky. Just stay where you are." Do you see the cycle? Complex, persona, resistance, each one feeding the other, locking you into patterns you can't escape. From the outside, life seems fine. You keep working, socializing, laughing, fulfilling your roles. But inside, it feels like a scratched record, the same tracks playing over and over, no matter how much you long for something new. This is psychological possession. It's the illusion of control while the real decisions are being made elsewhere. It's why you find yourself repeating the same mistakes, staying in the same relationships, or sabotaging opportunities you swore you wanted. Because in those moments, it isn't really you who's choosing. It's the hidden forces pulling the strings. And perhaps the cruelest part is this: possession convinces you that nothing is wrong. The system doesn't just hold you back. It tricks you into believing you're free, that you're acting on your own will, when in truth you're only moving within the small, invisible cage that's been set up inside your psyche. Jung believed that when these three fears, complexes, persona, and resistance, align, they become like guardians of a gate that leads to the true self. And unless you recognize them, they will never allow you to pass through. But there is hope. Because the moment you begin to see the pattern, when you stop being the victim, and if what we've uncovered so far feels heavy, it's because Jung never shied away from looking directly at the darkest corners of the human psyche. He believed that our lives are shaped by forces we rarely see, and that most of us spend our days trapped in patterns that are not truly our own. But Jung also believed something equally powerful, that even the deepest shadows can be transformed through awareness. The goal is not to destroy these forces, but to integrate them. You see, the complexes, the persona, the resistance, these are not enemies to be eliminated. They are parts of you, fragments of your history, shards of old wounds, strategies you once needed to survive. To reject them completely would be to reject your own story. The path forward is to bring them into the light, to make conscious what has long been unconscious, and to reclaim the energy they hold. Jung outlined 4 essential steps for this process. Step 1 is radical observation. This means paying close attention to your thoughts, emotions, and reactions, especially in the moments when you feel overtaken or when you find yourself repeating old patterns. It's not enough to recognize it afterward. The challenge is to catch it as it happens. Like hearing a whisper in a noisy crowd, at first it feels impossible. But with practice, you begin to notice the subtle signals: a knot in your stomach, a sudden change in your tone, a thought that feels automatic and intrusive. Step 2 is confrontation. Not a battle with yourself, but the courage to face what appears. When a complex is activated and you see it clearly, your instinct may be to run, to distract yourself, to pretend it isn't there. Instead, Jung invites you to stay, to look at that part of yourself as if it were a child, frozen in time, and ask, "What are you trying to protect me from?" That question opens a dialogue where once there was only fear. Step 3 is expression. Jung recommended dream work, active imagination, journaling, and creative practices. The goal is not art in the traditional sense, but communication with the unconscious. By giving shape to what has been hidden, you allow it to breathe, to exist, and to be integrated into your conscious life. And step 4 is responsibility. Once you've seen the pattern, you can no longer claim ignorance. You can no longer hide behind excuses or blame fate for your choices. This is the turning point, to acknowledge, yes, I was shaped by unconscious fears, but now I choose differently. Breaking the cycle doesn't mean you'll never fall back into old habits. It means that when they appear, you recognize them for what they are. So now you've seen the 3 great fears that Jung believed secretly shape our lives: the resistance to individuation, the prison of the persona, and the state of psychological possession where all of these forces intertwine. Each one, on its own, is powerful enough to steer your choices. But together, they form a hidden system designed to keep you safe, by keeping you small. And this is where the real challenge begins. Because once you've seen this system at work, you can never unsee it. You can't go back to the comfortable illusion that you are fully in control, that every choice you make is entirely your own. The truth is harder, but it is also liberating. Yes, much of your life has been guided by unconscious fears, but now you have the power to choose differently. The moment you bring these forces into awareness, the game changes. It's like turning on a light in a basement you've avoided your whole life. At first, the shadows look monstrous, but as your eyes adjust, you begin to see them for what they are: neglected parts of you, fragments of your story, waiting not to destroy you, but to be acknowledged, healed, and integrated. And this is why Jung's message is so radical. He's not telling you to become someone new. He's telling you to finally become yourself, to step beyond the roles, the masks, and the old scripts, and to live from the center of who you really are. It is not the easiest path. It requires courage, responsibility, and the willingness to face discomfort. But it is the only path that leads to wholeness. So before you leave this video, I want you to pause and reflect. Which of these 3 forces speaks loudest in your life right now? Is it a complex that hijacks you in moments you don't understand? Is it the invisible resistance that whispers, "Not now," whenever you try to grow? Or is it the mask of the persona, so fused to your face that you've forgotten where the performance ends and you begin? Write your answer in the comments, not for me, but for yourself. It is the first step in bringing to light what has long remained hidden. And remember, this journey is just beginning. In the next video, we'll continue exploring the inner architecture of the psyche, and I promise, what comes next is just as important. So if you found value here, make sure you subscribe and take this step with me into the deeper layers of your own mind, because the truth is simple. Your life has always been guided by these fears. But your destiny, your real destiny, begins the moment you decide to face them.